Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary with a knife video. I've got a comparison today. It should be a really fun comparison. It's a fairly obvious one. Here I have my much loved Microtech DOC. Really great knife. I totally love this knife. On the other hand, I have a very popular, very well loved, very classic Strider SMF. You can tell very easily by looking at these two that they are definitely related, and of course if you're in the know at all, you know this is a collaboration between Mick Strider and Anthony Marfione of Microtech. Okay, so which one is better? Which one would I prefer? Which one do I like the best? With some, some of this stuff, by the way, is subjective, and I'll try to point that out as we go along. Some of it is more just, a matter of fact, but let's go ahead and get into our comparison, starting off with size and weight. So the SMF is 9 inches overall, almost 4 inches of blade, 3 15/16, 5 1/8 inch handle, weighs in at 6.1 ounces, and it's a little over ½ an inch thick. Many people have talked about the fact that for its size, this is a fairly lightweight knife, and I say fairly because there are larger knives that weigh less, but it is a pretty efficient use of materials, especially because this is all G10, everything on this side, and I think that's a really wise move in terms of construction and design. What about the SMF? Well, it is the same size, 9 inches overall. The handle is a little longer because see how it sweeps up here? So the handle is, and then it has this lanyard hole protruding at the bottom. So you combine those two things, you get 5.5 inches of handle here over your 5 1/8 inches here. Blade length is the same, almost. It's 3 7/8. So we're dealing with almost 4-inch blades, the SMF being just a teeny bit longer. However, there is that cutting edge question, and that question is relevant on this one as well. Okay, by the way, the weight on the DOC is 7.1 ounces, so certainly the heavier of the two knives. Now, when it comes to carrying these in pocket, if you said to me, which one would you want to carry and use all day? In terms of comfort in pocket, definitely I've got to give it to the SMF. It is lighter, a little bit shorter, means it's taking up less space in your pocket, and it's even a little bit thinner. Okay, so even though I love the DOC and I carry it way more than the Strider, I would have to give it on technical details. The Strider is a lighter knife and a more carryable knife. Moving on to the blade. All right, we'll start off with the Strider once again. This blade happens to be CPM 154. There are a number of different blade steels. They're all going to be good steel. This is the 3/4 grind, which happens to be the Strider that I like the best, okay? There are Tanto Striders, there are full flat ground Striders, there are probably a few others, but I find the 3/4 grind is the one with the best edge geometry, so that it can be sharpened and used for cutting things better than the others. Now, having said that, I will say that probably a lot of people who own a Strider would benefit greatly from reprofiling that edge. Even reprofiled though, it's still a pretty thick pretty thick blade and a pretty thick edge geometry. All right, now what about the DOC? Once again, now this is pretty well the only blade shape, but you can get in different colors. You can get a black coated blade, a stonewash finish, or you can get a serrated blade. None of those appeal to me at all. I definitely wanted the satin in plain edge, and that's what I've got. This is also CPM 154, but I believe there are different versions of this as well. So there is that kind of commonality between the two. Which one of these blades do I prefer? By a large margin, I prefer the DOC. Mostly, well, in fact, entirely because of edge geometry. The DOC is quite thin behind the edge, which makes it cut extremely well. The Strider, on the other hand, not so much. It's fairly thick behind the edge, which means it's not a great slicer. It'll do fine, and I have a very sharp edge on this, and it's totally functional, but getting that edge is harder, and cutting in prolonged use, where maybe you're cutting up a bunch of cardboard or something, is harder with the Strider than with the DOC. Okay, so because of all that, I prefer the DOC. One other note about this blade happens to be probably the one that I think is more beautiful than any other blade I have. I love the lines in this knife. I love the compound grind. And I like the way that they've done this compound grind. Let me just quickly say this. I like that the thicker grind is at the front where there's potential for breakage. The thinner grind is at the back where you want a nice thin grind for, you know, carving tasks and cutting, doing small work tasks right near the base of the blade. You've got a nice thin edge profile there, so it slices really well. Okay, so that's how I compare the two blades. I think in this case, now part of this I will say is my own bias. As I said, this is a very gorgeous looking knife, and the way a knife looks, that's subjective, okay? So, blade primarily for edge geometry, I definitely like the DOC better. Also, I just happen to think the DOC is a much more attractive blade shape and grind. Moving down the line to lockup and deployment, okay? We have on this side the titanium frame lock. We have on this side the titanium subframe lock, which means that there's a little piece here that's been inserted. The benefit of this, by the way, is that if the lock were to be oversprung, or you know the lockup was no good, you had lock rock or something, it would be a simple matter of taking this out and putting in a new one, and now you're good to go again. Okay, so that's pretty handy. Both of them are very strong. Both of them are very smooth, even though the DOC is on a ball bearing system and the SMF is not. Okay, so ball bearings, no ball bearings, flipper, non-flipper. Now, here's how I'm going to call this. I really have no strong preference one over the other. Okay, I like the fact that the Strider doesn't have bearings. I like the flipper on the DOC. There are pros and cons for each of these, and I don't think either one, you know, can be said to be way, way better than the other. And so I'm going to call lockup and deployment a tie and say that both of them are quite functional, very solid lockup. One last sort of qualifier. There have been issues in previous generations of Striders with, you know, lock geometry and things not working well. I haven't heard about that too much lately, so presumably that's kind of fixed and they've got that all worked out. So based on all of that, I'm just calling it a tie. What about the handle on these two knives? Hold on. What about the handle on these two knives? I think you can see fairly readily that the handles are extremely, extremely similar. Let me get the knives back on camera there. You can see these blades are, sorry about that, very similar. Okay, the Microtech has these advantages. It's a little thinner overall, so notice at the back, see how it's just a little slimmer. It is also contoured aluminum, so it's rounded, 3D rounded, making it very comfortable. It's extremely grippy. The pocket clip on both is fine, although there was that major issue. Remember, the pocket clip was extremely uncomfortable when these were initially released, and they made a slight modification to it, and it's much better now, although still not amazing. Okay, both of these are single position pocket clips. All right, both of them are set up for a lanyard, but not well set up for it. Doesn't matter to me, but maybe to you. I've got to say though, the DOC is much more comfortable in hand. The two things that I really like, both of them of course have the finger choil. The two things that I really like about this are the slimmer handle, feels more comfortable in hand even with that somewhat annoying clip. And when you move up into the finger choil, this finger choil really locks you in. This one doesn't lock you in quite so much. Okay, so overall, just in terms of feel, I actually prefer the DOC. Now in terms of materials, I prefer the SMF. I like the G10. I like the full G10 backspacer and titanium. It does make the knife lighter. And Microtech is not unfamiliar with that, right? There are Microtechs that have G10. The SOCOM Delta has G10 and a subframe lock. And so I would have liked to see at least an offering from Microtech of a DOC with different materials that would make it a little bit lighter. All right. In terms of comfort, I definitely prefer the DOC. So that's how these two compare in terms of the handle. For my mileage, I'm going to go with the comfort of the DOC over the lightness of the SMF, although I do prefer the materials on this side over this side. The other drawback, by the way, to an aluminum knife is that if you drop it, if you put it in your pocket with some change, if you accidentally bang another knife against it, something like that, aluminum does chip up pretty easily, and that makes your knife look not as cool, right? Where The Strider, you know, you could put this in the washing machine and, you know, let it bang around in there for a while, pull it out, and it probably wouldn't look that much different. Now, I'd recommend oiling it well after that experience, but my point is this is going to be a little more wear resistant, okay? Or it's not going to show wear as easily as the DOC would show the wear. Overall, which one of these do I prefer the most? Definitely prefer the Microtech the most. I find it's more elegant. I find the grip in hand is more comfortable. The blade and the functionality of the blade is preferable to me. This is not a bad knife. I like it. It's a really well put together knife. But for me, plus the DOC, by the way, is cheaper by a significant margin. So for me, the SMF is the way. Can't speak here. For me, the DOC is the preferred blade. Okay, I definitely lean heavily toward the DOC. Now, there may be some Microtech fans out there, and you just love your Strider SMF. Hey, that's awesome. You know, I'm all for that. But for my mileage, I think the DOC is the winner in this comparison. Hope you enjoyed the video, and really, both of these are great knives, okay? You know, I'm not saying that, you know, Striders suck or that they're no good. They're very good. They're very tough. They're very capable knives. Just for me and for my taste and for my mileage, I'm going to take the DOC over the SMF any day of the week. There you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll talk to you soon.